Welcome, LilyPod listeners and LilyTube viewers, to another edition of LilyPod and LilyTube. We have a special guest today, someone we've known for a while. Meg Corey has been a member of Love in Later Years almost since it started, and we have appreciated her insight and wisdom expressed from time to time. And so we thought we ought to have her on here, number one, because she is a mid-single, and she's also a therapist, and I'm going to let Cathy give you the particulars on all that.
And before I introduce Meg, I would just like to say that because we're celebrating mothers this month with Mother's Day in May, we would like to encourage you all to share this video or podcast, if you're listening on the podcast, with all the single moms you know, because it's going to have a special focus on how as single moms we can create our best life and live it with a lot of love in our life, even when we're unpartnered. So we're excited about this subject.
Yep. And we just wanted to point out, too, that Meg has never had any challenges or trials in her life, and she can tell us how to live the blessed life that where we can just kind of slide by.
Yeah. You know, because all of us just have this blessed life and no challenges at all. All right. So now I'm going to introduce Meg officially. She grew up in the Pacific Northwest in the Puget Sound area. Her parents separated and divorced when she was 4 years old. She is the youngest of 4 kids and was raised by her single mom. Her mother joined the LDS church when Meg was 4, and shortly after her divorce is when she joined the church and passed away when Meg was almost 20. While Meg was still living at home. Thereafter, she obtained her first apartment with her 2 kitties. After about a year and a half after her mom's passing, she served an LDS mission in Texas. After returning to Washington, then 2 years later, she moved back to Texas. In Texas, she married, had children, graduated, divorced, married again, had another child, graduated again, then divorced again. She now lives happily single with 3 of her 4 children. 1 has married and moved out, and 3 kitties. Meg deals with ADHD and anxiety. These have not only been struggles to overcome, but have become assets to her in many ways. Her mental health and personal development journey began in middle school. Her Latter-day Saint young women's and personal progress taught her about setting goals and achieving them. Classes she took in school began her love of child and human development. This love grew through high school, where she had many opportunities to learn about human psychology. Incidentally, that was one of my favorite classes in high school myself. One day in Saturday school, which she had to do because she was always late to class, she was able to attend a mini class on the psychology of birth order. Her first job after high school was at the Montessori school, where her boss took interest in her personal and career growth. This boss had a degree in psychology, and discussions with her grew for her interest in even more. Many moments, classes, experiences, and opportunities added up to the continued growth of her love for all things psychology. Meg began her college career at 20, and it took a twisty path that she never gave up on for 15 years until she received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology. She later received her Master's of Science in Clinical Counseling Psychology. While in school for her master's, she discovered ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. This method embodies almost everything for her regarding how to approach mental health struggles. She has a strengths-based, person-centered, collaborative approach as a counselor. She does not view people as broken, but as whole people who have not tapped into themselves fully. Growth is a forever journey, and she enjoys participating and helping others in that journey. And we are so glad to have you here, Meg. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, before we get too far off of the introduction, why don't you tell us a little more about ACT and what it does and what kind of results it gives you?
Um, it is Russ Harris, I think, was the one that invented the method. For those who didn't see those air quotes for that, because he used to practice CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and felt like there needed to be more to it. And so he added the mindfulness aspect. Um, it's hard to boil down. I guess it's all about learning how to be mentally flexible. Um, Learning, as it's called, acceptance and commitment therapy. It's learning how to sort of accept certain things happening in life, um, whatever it might be. Like if somebody's in a severe accident and loses a limb, there's no changing losing that limb. Being able to learn to accept that, and then what can we do to move forward from that? Are there prosthetics, wheelchair, just figuring out all the other avenues of still living a valuable life,
Like the
even though that
commitment
thing
to
happened.
looking for solutions as we accept.
It's yes and no. It's
Okay.
kind of a commitment to live a valued life. So a lot of this, I'll bring it down to like, what does a person value? Sometimes if they say wealth, I'll actually really explore that of what about wealth is valuable to them. Is it about being able to afford certain things or whatever? And so then it's looking at, okay, you want financial stability. What you really are looking for is just to be able to not worry about your bills. How else can that look? So it's a little bit like CBT of reframing, but it's on that value.
Okay.
Well, I did an article in Meridian Magazine a couple weeks ago where, we Cathy and I believe in CBT and in thought work and all that, but I'm afraid sometimes we've taken it too far. Uh, because like it says in the book of James, if a person be destitute of daily food and you say, depart, be ye warmed and filled, but you don't give them anything to eat, they're still going to starve. and,
Right.
and I think one thing you can do is you can try to do, I mean, you can try to do thought work where you deny the facts of life and convince yourself that you don't need what you do need. At the end of the day,
Right.
I don't know that that helps. So I think it is important to be really honest with ourselves about, okay, what really do I need? And if I don't have an arm, if I got it blown off in combat or whatever, okay, how am I going to move forward and live a meaningful life without that? So it could be that I'm going to get a prosthetic arm, but there's also dealing with the grief and the loss of the arm, and then how do I move forward and turn this into an asset or something?
Right. Right. It's all about learning how to accept those. Because a lot of times I even think of a lot of people how they have intrusive thoughts. And CBT works to a point, but there comes a point where intrusive thoughts will just keep coming. And so
Yeah.
we can reframe and we can stop many of them, but not all of them. And so the ones we can't stop, it's kind of like learning to flow with water, of letting it come in and letting it leave. And there's in the ACT method, there's a lot of different ways to combat that through humor, through imagery, through different ways. Um, yeah,
I
because I'm
So
a big
processing
believer.
the emotion is important. And
Yes.
if those intrusive thoughts keep coming, another thought I've had too is that sometimes our energy doesn't hold the new thought or the reframe until our energy shifts somehow.
Right.
So
Right.
And I like to think of those thoughts and the feelings that go with them kind of like weather. Um, you know, it's going to rain for a minute, but the clouds moving on. And I
Right.
think if I drill down on it, and I can drill down on it with thought work too, but if I drill down on it, that's what's going to hold it in place and keep me stuck. Whereas if
Right.
I kind of accept that it's there for a minute and just sort of almost step back and watch it drift by, uh,
Yeah.
I feel better. And of course, that's a mindfulness sort of mentality, but
That was a good
Yeah,
question.
because well, because in the ACT method, there's 6 principles, and mindfulness and being in the moment is one of them, is learning how to just sort of tap into right now and allowing things to be as they are and not trying to always fight against everything, but just kind of, you had that thought, it is what it is, and also let it leave yourself rather than you heard it. Okay, now I got to hold on to it because my brain thought it.
Yeah, right. And with the reframing, it's not that we need to leave the judgment of our thoughts out of it. Like, because when we judge
Yeah.
it, we hold on to it too. So instead of judging it, we just get curious. And that mindfulness
Yes,
then is able to work for us and in our behalf.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because the ACT method is another behavior therapy, and so it does include DBT and CBT practices.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I don't strictly stick to ACT because I also add uh, processing. You know, most behavior therapies aren't necessarily about allowing a person to just sort of process through certain things too. And my way of practicing, I include the processing of past stuff and talking about it and eventually kind of shifting it to a different direction.
And isn't it fun when you have all of this knowledge and all of this experience, and then you add the Meg twist, like the personal,
Yeah,
like touch that includes, like, I have life experience that I can I can insert into my practice and really give my clients what I think is very best for them based on a
absolutely.
whole lifetime of learning.
And I do draw on that a lot. And honestly, there are a lot of us that don't believe in personal disclosure. I do to a level. I always make
Well, and
sure that
whether you
it's
do or not, that Meg twist is like your gift. It's
right.
your gift of having life experience, even if you don't share it. I mean, you can offer a certain kind of empathy.
And that does come out too. You know, there are clients when I express in a way that I understand where they're coming from, they really feel that I am understanding where they're
Mhm.
coming from.
Yeah.
and I was interested a minute ago, you said you do believe in personal disclosure to a point. What is the point? What is that point?
For me, because I will disclose certain things. Like if I know that the client loves cats, I'll disclose that I have cats and we can bond. It's basically disclosure that helps bond, or even helps to express a point. Sometimes I don't necessarily even say who I'm talking about. I might share a story of myself, but I'll say, you know, I know
Third
somebody who,
person. Right.
or, you know, things like that. So I do it to demonstrate a point. It's always for a purpose for the client. Um, and hopefully never an ego thing.
Yes. And I love that you said purpose, because I was thinking even intention, that there's always an intention behind it.
Oh yeah.
It's not just because you feel like talking about you.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I made some decisions when we were writing Intentional Courtship to disclose some things that I was a little uncomfortable disclosing. And I always asked myself, given, that situation, am I doing this for some reason that's going to help the reader identify more with what I'm saying? And if I
Right.
couldn't answer that yes, then I didn't see a point in going there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's some things I did not disclose in intentional courtship on purpose that I might disclose to a client in a coaching session if and I totally agree with you. And I've never defined it, but I think that I have the same philosophy that I only share to the extent that it helps them.
And what
Right.
exactly were those things?
I don't need to share that right at the moment. Well, and it's not one thing, it's just like you said, if there's something that comes to mind and you're like, this, I think this could really help my client, then there's purpose in it.
Right.
Right. So, Awesome. Well, I would love to dive into what we invited you here for. And I know you have lots of thoughts about this, and I'm so excited to hear more about it. And, we thought about doing a podcast on our own about it, but we're like, who better than to invite the person who first introduced this concept to us? You want to tell us what we're talking about?
About dating yourself. I
Yes.
actually, today I was thinking about that and I was like, well, I actually think it's more about courting myself.
Which goes great with intentional courtship.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell us what the point of this is and then how you do it.
Um, can I share first why I started?
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
I feel like that fits with the point of doing it.
That's a good place
Yeah.
to start.
Because I, being single and I'm not dating anybody, have been married, didn't have very good marriages, not supportive. And so it kind of was born out of a want for support, um, as well as just, I don't really believe in always seeking others to fulfill our needs all the time. And so I started thinking like, well, how can I fulfill my need for, thinking better about myself and viewing my body or myself in a better light. And so I started just using a voice of a loving, compassionate partner to, when I'm having a hard time, talking to myself. Like if I'm hating my body in that moment, actually taking on the partner voice of saying, you know what, honey, I think you look amazing. And just things like that. Well, I have decided to call it that I'm courting myself. Um, and what that entails and where that started was to fulfill a personal need of feeling like, needing support or needing kind words to myself, when I couldn't really muster them up for myself when I'm feeling down about how I look or what I'm doing with whatever. And just sort of allowing that partner voice to come in and say things like, you know what, honey, I think you look great. And to just sort of boost myself up in those moments. And then it kind of became a bigger thing after that.
Meg, it's kind of funny because occasionally a technique a tool that I've used with coaching clients is to have them give that alter ego that's always bagging on them a name. What's the stupidest woman's name or the stupidest man's name Okay, now, whenever that voice comes, turn to it and say, shut up, Mortimer, or what.
And it sounds like you're doing the opposite.
This sounds like the reverse of that.
Yeah. That you're saying, okay, if I'm going to be hard on myself, I'm going to have a loving partner in my head show up and tell me the good stuff.
Yeah. And it does come from a few different styles of therapy, but in the ACT method, there is that personifying voices or personifying our emotions. And so I sort of personified that compassionate, because I have called it like the compassionate third person. Like if you have that back and forth with yourself, this became my partner, because I never really had a partner in anything I've ever done. So I decided I'm going to become my own partner and really bring that into my life in a caring way.
And when was the idea of courting yourself born? I mean, I know that's kind of how it started and why you needed that in your life. When would you say you kind of defined it as such?
Honestly, last fall. it was just around, I don't know, it was the fall time when I don't even know what sparked it. I just decided, you know what, I want a partner, and I didn't so want to like go out and like actively seek for that from somebody, if that makes sense. I in dating, I want that to feel like I want it to be intentional, but not, okay, I need this thing, I need to find somebody who's going to give it to me.
Right.
know,
Because you were trying to fulfill your own need in that way.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
you can just simply want it when it comes along and is offered
exactly.
to you. Yeah.
Exactly. Sort of erasing any kind of ability to have any kind of desperate motivation, I guess, lack of better wording.
Yes.
I think it's kind of amazing. I've met a lot of mid singles over the last several years, both when I was one and since we started this Lily organization. But I've met so many mid singles that are almost literally asking their dating partners, no, I want you to say it to me this way. Or,
Right.
don't you know that this is my love language and this is what I need? If you really cared about me, you would do it the way I want you to. And
Absolutely.
so you see that all the time, and it's kind of like it's almost like I'm trying to pull out of the other person what I feel I need. And if they aren't giving it to me, I'm feeling a lot of angst about that. And
Yes.
so it seems like now some people might look at your concept of courting yourself and saying, well, you've just invented an imaginary friend because you're
Right.
lonely. So how would you distinguish between what you have created and the imaginary friend that keeps you company because you don't have any friends?
Um, Partly there isn't a big distinction, but also it's because I maintain that it is me talking
Right.
to me. Because the mind can create things that aren't healthy and turn
Sure.
something like that into an unhealthy practice. Because I like that you asked that because it is for a purpose of changing the narrative I have in my own head. Like
Right.
the intention, it really what it is behind it is what is my intention, and it's to change that internal dialogue that we all have with ourselves to a kinder one. It's also in a way to set the bar higher so I'm not settling for less than that I can talk to myself not in an overly boosting, like telling myself I'm the most amazing and better than everyone. We don't want it to go there either. But just that sincere compassion of, saying things like, I understand that that hurts you, but you know what? You're a wonderful person anyway. Or, really expressing like another human would that is being sincerely compassionate.
I love
Um,
it. I love it in so many ways because what you're saying is if I am a sincere, compassionate voice and narrative in my own life, I'm more likely to attract that.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
we've heard that it's said that we only accept the abuse to which we abuse ourselves. And
Don Miguel
Yeah.
Ruiz writes that in The Mastery of Love.
what you're saying is, so I'm going to do the opposite so that I can attract someone who treats me well because I treat me well.
Absolutely. And accept that too. Be able to
Oh,
accept
right.
a kindness that
You're
somebody,
practicing receiving it too.
yes.
Okay. And I love that you are saying, I maintain it's me talking to me for a specific purpose rather than like I'm crazy and I am multiple personalities.
Right.
Well, I mean, now the advantage, I guess I would say, that this other self has in affirming you is they can read your mind. I mean, they really can read your mind.
Yeah. Yes.
And so you're a flesh and blood partner can't necessarily. I mean, hopefully you meet somebody that treats you well and is a decent person and all.
Right.
But tell me a little about that. If you're in a relationship, does this other self kind of supplement you when your partner doesn't get you, or how does this work?
And I have thought of that too. And I believe so because I honestly, sincerely believe that even in a relationship, we can't expect the other person to be our everything.
Right.
It's because I think of the flip side of how unfair I feel when that's been put on me, how unfair I feel when they won't say what they need, or, when I have to read minds. And, I'm always looking at that. And so absolutely, I am very overly discuss everything as it is. So there's no guessing what's on my mind.
Right. So you're saying that they have the opportunity, I should say, not should. They have the opportunity to respond to you in much the same way as you are to you, because you're going to be very clear about what is on your mind.
Yeah. And this even helps to clarify what it is I need to my own self.
I love that. So you're practicing receiving kindness and clarifying your needs.
Yes.
Now, if you're courting yourself, are you taking yourself on dates? Are you buying yourself gifts?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I actually had the most amazing Valentine's date with myself. I took myself to a music show. It made it cheaper because I only had to pay for one person. But I went to a music show and I got myself sushi and my favorite chocolates. And I even thanked myself. I even told myself, "Oh, thank you so much for taking me out on this wonderful date." And it just kind of turned it into a funny, silly moment for myself to be able to like thank myself and then sit there and eat my sushi.
And then I believe you took pictures and shared it like anyone else would.
Yes.
I love it. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. There's these traditions and these norms we have that I don't think we even are consciously thinking about. But I mean, I like movies, and there were several years there where there were many, many days when I didn't have my kids. And, you have friends, but typically they have other priorities. Once in a while, you see them on the weekends or whatever. And meanwhile, you've got Monday through Thursday. And at times I became a workaholic with that. But there were times I just wanted to go see a movie, and there was a movie coming out and I couldn't think of anybody. So I'd just be like, yeah, that's probably not going to be in theaters next week. I'm just going to go to it. And I would show up at the box office and, buy my ticket, and I'd say, yeah, give me one for whatever movie it is. And they would look at, I mean, without fail, they would always look at me like, one, like you're here by yourself.
And I guess if you get last minute tickets, that's the best way to go, because usually there's just one, here
Right.
and there that are good seats.
Yeah, but I mean, it's funny because I can stay home and watch TV. I can watch a movie on TV and nobody thinks that's weird. But because I
Right.
want to go watch it on the big screen in a theater by myself, then that's weird. Well, I don't think it's any more weird than watching TV at home by yourself. So, but we
So
have
you got past that in your own head.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a sort of this idea that, oh man, you're pathetic if you have to go to a movie and sit alone.
But see, if you were like Meg, you could say, I'm taking myself on a hot date.
And what's really cool is I actually saw online one of my friends just yesterday or today posted about how she took herself out on a date. And she even said it like, I had the best date ever. And I loved seeing that.
Yeah, I think this is going to become a thing.
And I like it because it doesn't have to like replace having a relationship. It's about fulfilling needs that we feel like we have and not waiting for a relationship. Not having that, well, I'll get to do that when, but just go and do it. I've been talking about going to like the movies alone and stuff. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I had a coworker that I was really close friends with. He said, "Oh, I go to the movies all alone all the time." And at that time, I was like, that's weird. Like, why are you going by yourself? Well, I started doing it back then. And sometimes it's kind of nice because then you don't have to deal with another person to like meet up with or pay for or anything like that. So I started seeing how nice it can actually be to do those things. I kind of like the shift of calling it courting myself because it gives it a different intention too, rather than I'm just alone, but I'm treating myself. I am doing something to create memories with myself. And that, I think, especially being a single parent, can be really hard, is those memories of being in a relationship, those memories that we can have fun, sweet memories even with ourselves.
Right.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, I have good memories of my mid-single years, even times I wasn't on a date, or maybe I was, but I didn't think of it like that. But I think it's really another manifestation of this that I think we ought to talk about. Uh, Many of our listeners are Latter-day Saints, and I have often heard people say, and most of the people I've heard say this are married. It must be hard to go and sit in church by yourself. And that's always bewildered me. Not always, but since I became divorced, it's bewildered me a little bit. Like, why should that be hard for me?
Like, of all the things that
Of
hurt,
all the
that's
things
not
that hurt
it.
about being divorced, sitting in church is not in the top 10.
It's just the thing that people see.
It's the thing people see. And so they
Right.
say, oh, that must be tough. And yeah, not really. I mean, I can go there, I can open up my scriptures. Nobody thinks I'm weird for being there by myself.
Right.
They do at a movie theater. And
Right.
I don't think I'm weird for doing that. And I mean, there's times when we've been married that Cathy's been sick and the boys have been with their dad, and I've just gone by myself, and it's not a big deal. And I'm going to say that to everybody in our audience. If you're not going to church because you think it's weird to sit there by yourself, it's really not. I mean, if you want to go, go. And the other thing I think is, gosh, we've got so many bigger concerns than going, whether we have somebody to sit by in church.
Right.
I mean, you got to figure out, if you're a single mom that never worked, you got to figure out how to make a living. That's a big deal.
Right. Yeah, because when I was married, I got used to that early on because my first marriage, he quit going to church with us. So I was alone with my kids since they were tiny.
So nothing
And
changed.
so for me, nothing changed. If anything, it just got easier. Because my second marriage, when he would come, he would just make things harder on us. And so for me, the experience was the opposite of being single and not having a partner made my life easier being there alone.
Yeah.
Even recently, I mean, our kids grow up though too. And one day they will be somewhere else when you go to church. My children have decided that they're not going to sit with me at church because they want to sit in the very, very back row, and I sit in like the third to the back row. So I'm alone sitting by myself at church.
Huh. You just have different preferences.
Yes.
Okay.
But it really can be that our circumstances, like, we can be there alone for a multitude of reasons. And when it comes, being LDS, we know that ultimately we're not alone anyway. We
Right.
have
Well,
the
and
Savior with us. We have Heavenly Father with
yes.
us.
And
We
I've
aren't
always
alone
loved that
ever.
you have that, like, that close to you. It's funny because I think there's also the dichotomy of we also are ultimately on our own standing with God too.
Yes, absolutely. I think that a lot of that, I see that with people who, especially who've had temple marriages, where they, divorce and feel like, well, what was the point then? I am, again, on the other side, have not had a temple divorce, so I learned a different perspective on what a temple marriage really is. And ultimately, it still is between you and God alone. There is that secondary person making that promise together, but in the end, it's still between you and God, whether you're doing the
Because
things
it's
that
a
you ought to be
covenant
doing.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, this is a good place for me to insert that with what Jeff said and what you said about church. I felt at the temple. And I know a lot of people that just stop going to the temple and they don't. So people stop going to the temple, and when they're single, and they wait for a partner. And if I didn't call it this, but I courted myself to temples all over Utah. Like I wanted to go to every temple there was. I went far distances. Sometimes I would meet up with people, but often I went by myself. And it was like a love affair of me at
Yep.
the temple with God, and that I could do that for myself.
I really think it is important in our personal life, but also for a future relationship, that we're not waiting for somebody to do it for us. You know, even down to just reading scriptures, that waiting for a partner to read scriptures with us, that's, you know, we can always choose for ourselves to just do those things, to pray, to read the scriptures, to study a topic, to learn everything on our own. I mean, because we all ought to be anyway.
Right. We don't
And
have
not
to wait, and we don't have to go along with and then you go without something.
right,
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing we learn when we're single. I mean, there are some advantages to when we're single, really determining what we value. And
right,
I love that courting yourself isn't just about having love in your life and having a positive, sincere, compassionate narrative voice. And doing kind things for yourself so you have good memories. I mean, all of those things are wonderful, but you're also saying, I'm figuring out what I value in life and in me.
yeah. Even it's not even necessarily a deep thing, but just recently really realizing that as much as I like dancing, I don't actually ever want to go dancing, versus I really love music shows, or, you know, going to a baseball game or things like that. Like really even figuring out hobby things, not hobbies, but just activities that I actually like to do. What is it I really like to do? I don't want to do
You like
things.
sushi,
I love sushi.
you like shows.
Yeah.
Oh, and I remember with regards to flowers, I had a roses bush in my yard, and I would pick myself flowers all the time. And I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm so good to myself. um, I'd like to go back to something you said. You said that this courting yourself, what it's doing is it's doing away with your desperate need kind of motivation in
Well,
the
not,
dating world.
I will correct that, just in that I was never desperate,
Oh,
but it
right.
just
Sorry. And by your,
mitigating
I
that.
meant kind of in general, that like
Yes.
that desperate motivation that each of us may have when our
Yes.
emotional needs are not met, that um, this courting yourself can fill so that you're actually ready for a healthy partnership with rather than a codependent one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was said perfectly.
Yeah.
I,
And yeah, sorry, I wasn't meaning you specifically. I meant like in general. So thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I would never see you as desperate either. Like that doesn't seem to fit you. But I think what you're saying is any part of you that wasn't emotionally meeting your own needs is getting
Right.
taken care of now.
Right.
And in a unique and special way. And I want to refer to our YouTube video on LilyTube called The Dating Paradox. Did you ever see that one? Are you
I
familiar?
might have, but
Okay, so
it's
I'll remind everyone in the audience what that's about, and if it resonates, then go check that out. It's called The Dating Paradox. Now, the dating paradox that we see in the mid singles community and in our coaching practice is that, and even in our own lives and our own journeys after divorce, is that when we are desperate for a relationship, when we really, really want someone to come and fulfill our emotional needs, we're not ready for it.
right.
And
Right.
when all those needs are met, when we're in a good place, when we no longer need a relationship, that is when we are in a perfect position to have a healthy relationship, but we no longer need it. And so we might not feel as motivated.
Right.
So
you know,
can you speak to that at all? Like in your experience, I mean, I don't see anything wrong necessarily with meeting all your emotional needs and then, not feeling all that motivated. I mean, because the motivation usually comes from that desperation, but the
Right.
motivation can potentially come from a lot healthier place. So, like, what are you finding for yourself in that realm?
For me, I just personally, I feel like doing this practice has actually opened me more up to allowing a relationship
Can you
because I
tell us
feel
why?
because I want to feel like a whole, and I want to feel like I can maintain that wholeness. You know,
Mm,
in the past, I've noticed that even in friendships that sometimes I'll shrink myself around certain people. And I want to hold this practice and continue doing it so I do not do that. So I can maintain when there's a hiccup in something that I don't suddenly shrink and that I can maintain who I am in all of these circumstances.
I love
And
Right.
that.
I mean, because how you show up is really more important than how the other person is feeling. I mean, you don't get to regulate their mind. Um,
exactly,
and when you try, you tend to lose yourself. Whereas if you say, I'm going to show up in strength and I'm going to be supportive and I'm going to be a good friend to my partner and I'm going to, you know, have all these things that I'm going to try and bring goodness that I'm going to try and bring to the relationship. If they don't get it or if it's not sufficient for them or whatever, I still can feel happy that I showed up with integrity. Um,
absolutely.
And you're gaining trust. So I see a benefit of courting yourself is that you're trusting that you'll show up in strength.
Yes, yes.
One other thing I want to ask you about. Now, I know in my first divorce, it dragged out for a long time. We lived in the same house for 18 months while our divorce was pending. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. That was very difficult. But I would say, I say that to make this point. There is really nothing as lonely as a dead marriage, where you're stuck in the marriage, but uh, there's no connection, no warmth, no love, and and I guess, you know, I look at some of the decisions I made at that time, like to move states and a bunch of other things. And I think I was trying to run away from a problem that I think existed inside of me, um, which, you know, I regret now, some of those decisions. But I think if I'm lonely, if I'm suffering, you know, I can try to move somewhere else. I can try to take a different job. I can try to, there's all kinds of things I can try to do to, I can try on a new relationship. But if I'm empty inside, if I'm empty and afraid, it's never going to be enough. And,
Absolutely.
and so I think it does have to begin here. Now, I also think we're social beings and we need to have interaction and connection with other human beings as well, but that's part of kind of managing our own and taking stewardship over our own soul, is, you know, if Meg's not free Saturday night for us to go to dinner with, somebody is, you know. uh,
Right.
and I can find ways to manage that that don't
I
rely on one other person doing exactly what I want.
right. And I feel like too that doing this, you know, you were talking about like relationships and showing up. I feel like this helps also to connect even more with people because it's not a purpose of isolating and staying in my own little apartment and just kind of like never talking to other people. It actually me I feel like is making me more safe inside myself so I feel safe with other people.
And it
Okay.
relieves you of the need for that other person to show up in the way that you might
That
prefer.
I yeah, that I think I need them to show up because I don't need them to. I just want them to show up how they show up, and if that meshes, great, and if it doesn't, that's okay too.
So you're safe in yourself and therefore you feel more safe connecting.
Absolutely.
And do you relate with what Jeff said about like taking stewardship over your own soul?
Absolutely. That's why I don't believe in putting all of our needs into somebody else. The only one that we really can do that with is the Savior. Only one that we can put our whole self into, and he can carry that. No other human being can be everything we need them to be. We can't expect them to even show up every single day with the same amount of energy or same amount of capacity. I mean, I know I can't show up every day with the same amount of capacity. And if I feel that would be unfair to do to me, I don't want to do that to somebody else.
Yeah.
If I could throw a little theology on top of that too, because I think that's a really important point. Um, Jesus talked about the two great commandments. The first one was to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, basically with everything you are. And then
Yeah.
the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, I think like unto it means it's loving God and it's loving God's children. And,
Yeah.
you can't mistreat my children and not hurt me. So
And that
Right.
I
includes
think there,
yourself.
in as much as you have done it unto the least of these, you have done it unto me. So I think it's that. And then I think if I love God's children because they're God's children, that includes me too. So
Yeah.
I'm loving them as I'm loving me. And I think to say, and you'll hear people preach this, that you should love others more than yourself. I think that creates unhealthy balance. I think
Yep.
it creates kind of the martyr complex, if you will, where, well, I did so
I
much for you. How come you're not loving me back?
I
And
agree with that.
so I think I don't think it's funny. I mean, look at the way Jesus phrased it all, and I think he was a pretty good psychologist.
And I actually in my journal, I have now stating something about he shall be called counselor, and it's me writing my journal as if I'm talking to the Savior, because he was called counselor. He is our I try to take all of my pages out of his book of how to be the best therapist.
Mhm.
Um, but that's something that I, for quite a while now, that my mind latched onto, was that love others as thyself. That we are expected to love ourselves equally like we love others, that it is an equal amount of love, because we can't.
And it's real love.
I
It's not selfishness. It's
Absolutely.
the
That's
love of
why.
God in us.
Absolutely, because there is a narcissistic love, but that isn't actually self-love.
No, it's ego.
It's pure ego. Yeah.
And it
That
usually masks a deep insecurity.
exactly. It usually masks, or pretty much 100% masks, self-hatred. That if they really loved themselves, they wouldn't be narcissistic.
Right. And, I would dare say, and you can tell me if this resonates with you, that as you are showing up with a sincere, compassionate narrative in your own mind, that's how you show up for others more.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think that we give a certain amount of love to others, even if we don't care about ourselves. But we definitely open our capacity to give more of ourselves when we have more of ourselves.
Well, and you're not only practicing receiving kindness, you're practicing how to be kinder. And so you're going to
Absolutely.
just naturally, as like that capacity grows, learn how to show up kinder in your relationships.
Yeah, it's just kind of filling each other's buckets over and over and over.
Yeah.
Meg, have you seen that movie Dumb and Dumber?
Yes.
I mean, it's, a long time ago now that it was made, but I love that line where he says, why don't you go and talk to her for me, and then I won't have to brag about myself later. And I mean, but he's revealing what a lot of people actually implicitly believe, that in order to get somebody to like me, I have to brag about myself, or I have to get someone else to brag for me.
Right.
And I think in a lot of ways, I mean, I have had a few coaching clients, and in point of fact, myself, who have fallen into that trap at times. And I think in a funny way, people track that, like if I'm pretending to be more than I am, and I think it's unattractive.
Yeah.
She's nodding to anyone in the in the listening audience, but why don't you tell us a little more about that?
About the unattractiveness of bragging, or
Yeah, the narcissistic kind of. I mean, I know for some people when they're really in an emotionally weak kind of position, I need the big strong guy to come in and protect me and make everything okay because I don't feel like I can do it. And I think, unfortunately, that's the person who falls victim to the narcissist most often.
yeah, yeah, that's very true. I mean, I am very careful of ever calling a person a narcissist, even
They
if they
are
are.
too.
Yeah.
But just that behavior, it is when we aren't able to lift ourselves up, we absolutely fall victim to that, and that need to be flattered versus nurtured. You know, that's what the narcissistic behaviors latch onto, is that need to be flattered, rather
Right.
than somebody who's able to nurture themselves and seeking true nurturing. That empty flattering doesn't even feel good. It doesn't sit right with you either.
I actually want to expand on the word nurtured. I love that you brought that up. And I know that your mom passed when you were a young adult.
20.
Yeah. And that you've missed her. You've missed that nurturing. And um, to some degree, I know that you like to um, feel that nurturing inside of yourself, and you like to give that to your children. And maybe speak
Yeah.
a little bit more about nurturing and what that means to you, because like I said, we're celebrating mothers this month. The month of May is the big celebration of mothers, and and in particular single moms is what we're talking about today. And your
Right.
mom was a single mom, you're a single mom, a lot of single moms are listening, so
Yeah.
tell us about nurturing.
That seems like a really big topic to me to even discuss. Um, which direction should I go? How I nurture myself? How do I nurture others? How do I receive it? Like, where do you want me to start with that?
Maybe how you're experiencing it within courting yourself, and then maybe it's evolved in your growth capacity to nurture as well.
Because how I view nurturing is, how do I view that? I don't know if I can put it into words. Just sort of feeding a person's healthy emotional growth, where that shows up in the self-courting is doing those kind things. Well, and kind of speaking on the self-nurturing, the doing the self-courting like that, I feel like it does do a lot of nurturing. Um, what I need, I feel like I kind of spoke a little bit about that already, is just that in those moments of feeling down, like let's say maybe having just a dip, feeling like, am I really ever going to make enough money to pay for everything I need? And taking that compassionate voice, that encouraging voice. I think for me, nurturing a lot is encouraging people in and self in strengths and things that we know, like, you've made it this far, you've done a lot of good things, you've fought really hard to get where you're at, and look at all the things that you have overcome. You're going to overcome this too. And being able to have that self kind, just really encouraging and compassionate talking to itself.
And I remember thinking about Christ, and how when the world was being made, there was a stopping and a recognition of each day and what they accomplished. And I think that can be really beneficial when in our night prayers to recognize what we've done that is good. And it is very motivating. So like that
Absolutely.
encouragement is very motivating.
Absolutely. I mean, as a therapist, I even do that. That's kind of, being able to practice that and do that for self absolutely feeds even more into my capacity to do that, with my children, in my job, friends, whoever else, and being able to give that and help people see what they've done. That's why I say I'm a strengths-based therapist, because I really believe in really pointing out how how we have done. Like I had mentioned in the Lily group, saying that my kids, if somebody were to look at them, they're not impressive to the world. They're not going to some Ivy League school. They're not doing these worldly impressive things. But I look at them as a human being, and how we've fought to get where we're at, and the wisdom that they seem to have at 17 and 19 and 16 years old, that I'm incredibly impressed by. Like, that's not me. But, I did nurture their ability to think, and I nurtured their ability to analyze and really contemplate and come to conclusions on their own, and experience some things that, maybe other parents don't want their kids to have to go through, and none of us do, but allowing it to play out and having that compassionate, kind, encouraging talk after the fact.
Yes. And it doesn't have to become all about us and our failures as a parent when our children struggle. When
Right.
we recognize that our success is measured on our internal desire to help, and that's really
Absolutely.
all that's required of us. And that when we move forward with that understanding, we're a lot more confident. And something I'd like to speak to single moms right here, right now, is that maybe one day we used to be able to recognize the 50 things we got done in a day when we had a spouse and we didn't have like the duties of mom and dad, and now we feel like we're just barely squeaking by with the emergencies. And so I think combining compassion with recognition, or if, let's say, we come down with an illness and the best thing I could do all day is rest, and dang, that was hard, I really wanted to do stuff, but I'm going to get myself better so that I can do more stuff. And recognizing even when we rest and what or do whatever is needful at the moment, rather than like feeling like we need to be all things to all people and do more than we can possibly do.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you, Meg, because you talked about how your kids are not Ivy Leaguers or anything like that, but I had a son who went through a drug problem for a period of time, and my mother would always chime in and say, "Well, why don't we tell him that Heavenly Father doesn't want him to do that?" And I said, he was raised in the church. He already knows that, and she'd say, "Well,
Right.
can't we tell him that the Lord wants him to be showing up to his meetings on Sunday?" And I said, again, he's raised in the church. He already knows all that. There's nothing we can really tell him persuasively that he hasn't already heard 100 times. And so the thing that kept coming to me is this stew takes a long time to cook. That our influence is not measured through these grand moments when we're, testifying to someone,
Right.
boom, their life changes, especially our kids. It's kind of the day-to-day relationship that we build with them. And then when the chips are down, when there's a problem, when they know they're in over their head, they come and say, "Mom or Dad, I need your help right now." And, I think that there were times with my son when I took a little firmer hand because he was doing illegal things when he was a minor under my care. And there were some tough love moments, but it took a long time for him to finally come around. And I'm thankful that it happened before he died.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think sometimes we're tempted to get wrapped around the axle about, for him, I didn't care if he went to Harvard. I just hoped he'd finish high school and, live clean and have a good life. And, and he was moving in a good direction. I think he would have done all those things, but for him, the quickest way to get him to do something is to tell him not to. So,
Right.
I think,
And I've asked him if he played or reverse psychology, and he said that it worked only if he wasn't onto it.
right.
Yep.
But if he was onto it, like it
Yep.
didn't work at all.
Yeah, well, I could give you
And he was
tons
pretty
of,
smart, so it wasn't very easy to do.
I could
that.
give
Yeah.
you tons of funny examples about that. I mean, I'll never forget the day he figured out that kids' meals were like half price of the adult meal.
And he was feeling gypped.
Yep.
Yeah.
He thought it was a big con.
That's funny.
Anyway,
Well,
but I think our kids tend to, well, our influence over our kids tends to be a slow drip, not a big fire hose. And
well, and I kind of like on that vein, what makes me think of too is nurturing and how we are still needing to nurture as single moms. That a lot of times we can get caught up in what our ex is or is not doing, and how it affects our relationship with our kids, how we might interact with our children because maybe the ex is talking negatively. I'll share somewhat of an experience of mine, not too many details, but especially with my first marriage, the ex actively would tell my children not to trust me. And every time he would take them out to eat or do anything, he would actively and word for word say, don't trust your mom. She doesn't feed you. She doesn't take care of you. On my end of things, I knew what kind of person he was, but I honestly nurtured their relationship with him. I would just tell him that, he loves you. He doesn't always necessarily show it the way maybe you would like him to, but, and when they would tell me, that they miss their dad or that they love their dad, I'd be like, yeah, you really do love your dad. And I bet you miss your dad. And I would nurture that. I would allow that to grow.
And would you say that required to some degree having a heart of peace towards him to be able to do that, like, and really be convincing?
I think so, because I don't ever want to be a liar. So I was coming from a place of truth. I will say that during my first marriage, I really did a lot of personal work before the divorce ever happened to be able to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Big spark for that was, interestingly enough, Dr. Phil. I watched him a lot while I would nurse my baby, and there was an phrase that he said that really resonated, is that he said, you don't deserve a divorce until you're no longer angry. And so that really sparked in me. I'm like, what does that mean? And so I really just pondered that and figured out what he meant was not to, it was just letting go of the anger, allowing forgiveness and letting all of that pain go so that the divorce could happen peacefully for the children.
Mm.
And so I really started working on any of my reactions to things, any of my own behaviors, so that when I did divorce, it would be as peaceful as it possibly could be for the kids.
Yeah.
And he, of course, didn't.
well, and for you too.
Yeah. But
and he didn't, but you could still decide how you wanted to show up.
I responded rather than reacted to these things.
Beautiful, because you let go of that anger, and and the thing is, then you also know you made a calm and clear choice rather than one out of
Right.
emotion. Um,
And I feel like that allowed my relationship with my children to be as healthy as it could be for them to learn to trust me, because they didn't trust me at that time because of those things. But my desire for them to trust me wasn't for my own ego, it was for their own safety and for their own feeling
and
cared
their
about.
relationship with their dad was for their own good. And it didn't have to distract from you having a good relationship with them. Like it didn't,
Right.
you didn't feel like there was a need to compete. And
Not
that,
at all.
and that goes along with something we wrote about in intentional courtship and also talked about on our podcast episode 107 on LilyPod, is our concept of love is additive. And this is a really good demonstration of that, is that you can encourage a positive relationship with their other parent and not be threatened by it.
Right.
Because any love in your children's life is good for them.
Absolutely. And that's all I wanted for them.
And something I just like to share with the audience without sharing any details is that off screen, we were talking a little bit more in detail about how you feel about your former. And I know that you are in a very healthy and good place towards that person. Like you have compassion, you know that like you wish them well in your heart. You wish nothing but happiness. And that's huge. I think that is a really good, healthy place for all of us to try to get to with our formers, because when we're there, we're no longer hostage to our past.
Absolutely.
I think another point that you kind of implicitly made there, and I'd like you to comment more on this, but I think there is a tendency when we've had a lot of influence with someone, as in someone we were married to, there is a tendency to think that's going to continue after the marriage is over.
Right.
And like I remember talking to this guy in a singles ward I attended, and he's out in the hall and he's just fuming about, he was in a very raw stage of the divorce, but he's talking about all these things he's not going to let his wife do.
Right.
If she doesn't date somebody I like, or approve of or whatever, then she's not going to have the kids. And he's going on and on about all these things he's going to make her do. And I said to him, just stop. I said, is she, hiring prostitutes or dealing drugs out of her house? No. Okay, then you're probably not going to have any success going to court and getting sole custody. So just knock it off. Stay in your lane. If she wants to have beer in her fridge, she can do that. It's a legal substance.
Yeah.
And, you may not approve of it. I may not approve of it.
And you could even let your children know you don't approve of it, but still encourage them to nurture their relationship with the other parent in a healthy way.
Right.
But if you try, if you don't stay in your lane and you're trying to regulate what's going on at that other person's house or what they're telling the kids or, all that kind of stuff, all you're going to do is make yourself crazy because you're trying to change things you can't change.
Yeah. And ultimately, you also do the exact opposite of what you're trying to do. You make an enemy of yourself to your children.
Right.
Because you're pitting them against the other parents and you're pitting yourself against them. And eventually you pull the kids will pull away from whoever's making the most noise and, being able to nurture. Yeah. And being able to just really, back to the word nurturing, just nurture that relationship that's in front of you when they're in your home, just creating that space of love and compassion and nurturing.
It's a better place to spend our limited energy.
Absolutely. And limited time.
Yeah. Yep. Limited time is also, yeah. So, okay. Going back to courting yourself, which I also think is nurturing yourself. Is there anything else you want to share about that process? It sounds like you've been dating yourself for a good 6 months now. How's it going with you?
It's funny enough, it's getting easier to just have that voice show up rather than having to actively make it show up. It's
almost going to start integrating, don't you think, at some point?
I feel like it is, honestly, because I feel that when, just earlier today, talking to myself and, that being uplifting about, and often, especially for, well, I'm not going to say just us women, it's everybody, especially as we get older, feeling like some kind of way about our wrinkles and bags under our eyes and stuff like that, post kid bodies, and being able to say, you know what, honey, I think you look beautiful. Or, you know, I know that you had 4 kids, but I love it anyway. Or
even going to, you had 4 kids and every single thing that did to your body is absolutely beautiful because you created life.
yeah. And being able to hear that from another person, it's
every wrinkle shows your wisdom.
yes. And exactly. And it's really, I feel the difference now. Like it feels like it just feels like it's more becoming more integrated and becoming me talking kindly to myself.
So the goal is, I think, for anybody who might start this courting yourself journey would be the integration of that positive, nurturing voice.
Exactly.
And
Creating the voice however we can, and then slowly bring it to be our own.
And also feeling more safe in connecting with others because we feel safe in us.
Because if we're not judging ourselves, then even if somebody else is judging us, we don't care.
Right. Because that judgment has never been in us unless it is in us.
Yeah.
It can stay with them.
I heard a long time ago, and I totally believe this, that we only believe what we tell ourselves. So anybody else could tell us any kind thing or any mean thing that they want and tell us 1,000 times. But it's when we play it through our own head over and over that we believe it. And that's kind of why this practice too, is that it's my own head saying it over and over, and eventually my own head will believe it.
I think that's true. And my experience is that when somebody says something so outrageous that I've never even thought about myself, that doesn't ring true, I can just like slough it off. It's not even, doesn't even hurt, right? But when it hurts is when there's any glimmer of truth in what I've said to myself about that thing.
Yes.
And so we get all defensive and we point fingers and we say, you hurt me. But really,
we hurt ourselves.
Yeah, we've hurt ourselves with that same talk. And that's really, this is why I always say that when something comes up emotionally, it's ready to be healed. If we can interpret it correctly, if we can understand that it's ours.
Yep.
Meg, two questions kind of about friends. The first one is I get a little bit concerned when I hear mid-singles say things like, I'm not dating right now, I'm just focused on my kids. And I'm not saying people should or shouldn't be dating right now. That's not the point. The point is I'm just focused on my kids. And I think there's almost a sense in the statement of virtue signaling. It's noble for me not to be dating and to just be focused on my children. But I feel concerned that what can happen in that situation, not just because they're not dating, but maybe because they're not interacting with same-sex friends or whatever, that the obsessive focus on the kids, the sole focus on the kids can lead to this sort of quasi-spousal relationship where you kids are my whole social life. And if you're not nice to me, I don't have anybody to be nice to me. And, I think that is almost inevitable if your whole focus in life is your kids. Talk to me about that a little bit and give your thoughts.
Well, that specifically, I mean, that kind of does tie into the nurturing yourself. Right. I am working currently with clients who are healing from a parent who did that to them.
Right.
Because that is called emotional incest, and it does actually have the same damage to a child as if it was incest too. The studies have shown that it
even when it's like completely unintentional.
Even if it's unintentional. And that's the hard part, is that a lot of us, every human being, we have actions that have unintentional consequences.
We did a
but
podcast on
just
that.
but yeah, but really but really being more intentional and being aware of your own actions and putting that emotional need in your children, which even if you're married, putting that into the children. There's so many women that when the kids grow up and they're empty nesters and the last child leaves the home, they don't know who they are. They don't know their own identity. They now have this crisis because they don't know what to do with themselves because their whole world was their children.
Well, and
And
they may have had a husband in some cases who they became estranged from or whatever. And
yeah,
so they invested in their kids even more. And now the husband's still around, but she doesn't want him around
yeah,
because the kids were always a buffer, and now they're not there for that anymore. And
yeah,
it just puts them, I think, in a messy kind of frame of mind. And
absolutely.
I, so I really encourage the people listening. Look, if you don't feel ready to date, and you're a woman, get some girlfriends. You're a guy, get some guy friends.
And
Yeah,
I'm going to actually
And
move to try this courting yourself thing because it will benefit your children
yes,
because
because
those
you'll be filling
needs
your
are
own
not being
needs.
placed on them.
Yeah,
yeah, and I think that's kind of where I was going with that subject too. Now, do you know of Dr. Greg Bear?
I don't.
He wrote the book called Real Love. Anyway, uh, Cathy asked him specifically the day that we interviewed him, um, if you could get your need for love met from God. And I thought his answer was interesting. He said, yes, you can. You can get it from God and from the Savior, but it takes more faith because they're not sitting right in front of you like another person.
Because he
Right,
advocates real love as being transformative in your life when you really receive it from someone who's giving it freely, not being manipulated into it, not
right,
having like the getting and protecting behaviors that we often do to get love, but having it
Imitation
offered it
love.
freely is transforming. And and so many of us say, well, I just don't need love. Like, well, I mean, that's proven not to be true. I mean, when
right.
children in orphanages that weren't hugged died
Yeah,
literally because they didn't have that social and warmth connection to another human being. So I mean, I think there's a lot of reason to believe that he's right.
Right.
I just loved thinking when I was single, and this was, I guess, part of courting myself, but I never called it that. I never defined it as such, that I would feel the love of God inside of me, and that is the love that I really need, and that's the love that we all need. And when we can share it with each other, that's so much better.
Then it comes through that other person
absolutely,
as a
absolutely.
channel or a
But when
vessel.
we're single and we may just not have that, it is available in God. Just like you said, we're never really alone with them in our lives.
Right. Well, and I come from too, like it's can be really hard to feel God's love if you're not filled with love. If you can't love yourself, sometimes it is hard to feel that from some other source.
Mhm.
To be honest, I spent my entire childhood, teenage years believing God didn't love me because I couldn't feel it because I didn't understand how that relationship was supposed to look. You know, I
Right.
didn't know what his love felt like. And so the more I grew in learning to care about myself, opened me up to being able to know how he loves and what that feels like. And, you know, for some people, maybe even liking what that feels like, because sometimes people go through rejecting that feeling of peace and love because it's so foreign,
Hmm.
and being able to just allow that feeling to happen.
Well, and sometimes we also do what we're used to. So if we grew up in abusive families, if we had a first marriage, especially, like, then that adds on top of it if that there was abuse in a previous partnership.
Yeah,
So one thing I decided when I started courting intentionally, like before we ever wrote intentional courtship, I don't think I called it that, but I was intentionally trying to find the very best person for me and not just end up with who came along and offered love. And
right.
And for me, that meant saying no to some people. It meant getting really specific about what I wanted, clarifying my own needs and desires. Um, and it it also required me understanding that the love that I wanted would be something that I was looking to be freely offered. And I don't think I quite understood that at the time. Um, I'm trying to remember where I was going with this. It was very profound. um,
I don't know where you were going with it.
dang, I should have gotten there faster. Um,
Well, something I can add to that, just in a little bit of a plug for you both, is along those lines, just that personal internal growth, working with you. And because I'm always a person of bettering myself, but having that facilitated, like certain topics each month, things like that, really helped to spark even more just thoughts and directions to take things. Because you had mentioned, really being specific about what you wanted.
mm,
I always felt like I was specific, but sometimes that you've asked certain questions, very poignant questions, where I'm like, okay, that's a good question. Let me ponder that a bit and let me see if I can define it even better.
yeah. And in a large sense, I think a well asked question can change a whole thought process when, when it's received by the person to, like you said, to really ponder it and get more specific with what you want. Um, I guess where I think it still hasn't quite come back to me. I hope it will at some point before we wrap up. But um, and when you said we asked questions, like, do you remember the setting in which we asked the question that like helped
I
you?
couldn't tell you
Okay.
because just the
Because you've been
interaction with,
listening to the podcast, watching the videos, and
yeah,
involved with,
and
yeah,
well,
things.
and talking to my own clients, and all of it's jumbled.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, we've always loved how we always love having you involved because you offer so much depth and richness, and we're really glad to know you. And I think this has been a great conversation about courting and nurturing yourself, and finding that when you really feel safe inside of you, you feel safe with others, and so you can connect better, and eventually that voice integrates into you, which is
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Meg, I'll just throw one other thing out on that, and maybe you can expand on it. But I found that dating was a lot easier in my 40s than in my 20s. And that surprised me. I wouldn't have expected that.
And a lot of people say that they don't relate with
Right.
that it's been harder.
I mean, I was, when I was in my 20s, I was young. I looked like a movie star. But if somebody turned me down for a date, all I could do was sit and stare at the wall for 3 hours. I was so humiliated and mortified. And I think the difference was in my 40s, 30 or 40 pounds overweight and broke and, lots of concerns about how to move forward. I was more comfortable in my own skin. I had been through some hard things. I had achieved a certain amount. I had an idea of who I was and what I might bring to the right relationship. And so if somebody didn't value what I brought to the table enough to continue, that was okay, because I'm not for everybody, but I am for somebody. And if I liked me, then it didn't really matter if somebody else did or not, because there would be somebody along that would, because I knew I was lovable for myself.
And that's sexy. It's sexy when we show up confident like that.
Right. Well, and I think too that the different perspective on what dating is for and what marriage is for and what marriage actually is about, being older, because I like that's why I loved when I discovered the intentional courtship world is is really just the intentional living, just that there is, I don't know how did I want to say that? It's because when I was in my 20s, how I viewed what marriage was supposed to be about is completely different. I now I don't feel the need to ever get married. If being older and looking for a right person, not the right person, um, I feel like it's easier too because I don't have the same expectations. Like this person I'm meeting, they aren't the one. They don't need to be the one. There is no the one. It's does this person mesh? I want to live out the rest of my life with the life I'm building now, such as like with courting myself in creating a healthy, happy space in myself, in my home. Will this person maintain that rather than when we're young, we're like, oh, we're supposed to get married. I got to find this person. Oh, we're in love, so it'll work.
Yeah.
We hear the counsel that you can make it work with anyone, but that's so much deeper. Like you could if both sides really worked at a lot of things.
Which is
Right.
what President Kimball actually said, if both are
Yes.
willing to pay the price.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And you
how
don't know when you marry if both people stay willing. Even
right.
if they're willing in the beginning, which I think we're all willing to some degree because that's why we get married.
Right.
So that actually does remind me of what I wanted to say, and it is kind of related to that. That when we come from abusive backgrounds, whether it's our family of origin or past relationships in marriage or both, which is often the case, we can be very uncomfortable with what is healthy.
Yes.
And we fall into similar patterns over and over because that's what's comfortable, even though it's not good for us and even though we hate it.
Yep.
And so when I was intentionally courting, not knowing that's what it was called, but I was looking for the right person for me, I thought, okay, if I want a different result, I got to do things differently. And I remember with Jeff, like there was a lot of comfort there in terms of conversational chemistry, but there was a lot of discomfort and I didn't know why. And it's interesting, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky navigating the dating world, because when we feel discomfort, we think, oh, that means it's wrong.
Right.
Which is why we had such a crazy love story and how we were on and off again, because I did not interpret that. But I think over time, and he showed himself as a loyal friend to me. That's why I think when we got back together after a full year of just being friends, that I felt more comfortable in the discomfort, if that makes sense.
In the right kind of discomfort.
Yes, the right kind of discomfort, the discomfort that comes from maybe being for the first time in your life in a relationship that's more healthy than you've ever had before.
Yeah, I actually had an experience during my first marriage that I feel like I gained a plethora of lessons from that one little moment. I was sitting on the couch with my then husband, and I felt this peace and comfort. And at this point in our marriage, I knew it was bad. Like a lot of bad things had happened. And I suddenly was so curious. I was like, that is really interesting how I know this is not where I should be. And to feel this odd comfort. And it wasn't a comfort, it wasn't a moment where Heavenly Father was telling me things will be okay. I realized it was that comfort of familiarity of the bad things that were going on. And how easy it is for us to be
The
like,
uncomfortable comfort.
yes, I was so comfortable with that way of life. And I was afterwards a little abhorred by that. I was like, wow,
I
that
can't
needs
believe
to
I got
change.
comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yep. And
I kind of look back on some experiences the same way. Like, I cannot believe that used to be okay. Because like it wouldn't now.
And it's gave me a really deep compassion for people who stay in situations that outsiders like, why are you staying in that situation?
Mhm.
Because it's really easy to get
Yeah.
comfortable there
Yeah.
and be afraid of what else could happen if I leave this situation.
Yeah. I have the same compassion too. And going back to what we were saying earlier about like, we only believe what we tell ourselves, and that our reactions are often really in response to how we feel inside about whatever comes up. Um, we did a video on emotional sunburns, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and that, when we all have places that get really tender and sensitive, that when we hit on them, or when they get hit on, they come up. But then I just like to go back to that thing that I'm really a big proponent of this in my coaching practice and in my own life, that when something really uncomfortable comes up in our emotional well-being, instead of thinking, oh, this is bad, like, and just feeling that it's a bad thing, it means it's ready to be healed. It means it's ready for a shift. And we
Yeah,
can actually do some active work to shift it and heal it and be done with it.
absolutely.
So and it's interesting that your curiosity and I love that word too, because when we can get curious, then we learn more about us. Like, because we have all the answers inside of us all the time. We just have to learn how to access it. And that
Yeah.
curiosity is a good way to access it without, judgment. Um, and even though you said, like, I can't believe I was comfortable with it, and you probably had a little judgment there.
For sure.
But then I think at some point you probably replaced that with compassion.
Well, and it didn't necessarily turn into judgment of I was bad or wrong for it either. It was more of like a revelatory judgment, if that makes sense.
Oh, right, right. That, like, okay, I need to be aware I'm feeling comfortable here.
Yes.
And that's kind of what happened while I was dating, really super intentionally, that I figured along the way, I probably need to get comfortable with things that I haven't been comfortable with before, to be in the place I want to be, to look where I'm going and get where I want to be, rather than just keep doing what's comfortable, because it's not been good for me so far.
Absolutely.
I want to
Yeah.
ask both of you, what's a thing that could be comfortable but isn't good for you? That maybe you would be used to and comfortable with in a relationship.
The thing that comes to my mind is like uh, I think as a teenager, I like the bad boys, like they're cool or whatever. Like, I don't know, just like the silly things we think as teenagers, sometimes it lives on in our adult brains and stuff. Like, and I hate
Right.
to even say that, but like, people say, oh, like, women will go for the bad guys and they won't go for the good guys. What's up with that? Well, and that's another thing, is I think that boring is wonderful. And I don't think Jeff is boring. That's not it. That's not what I'm saying. But we don't have all the drama, and that, yeah, we have some, because we both came with some
Right.
emotional sunburns. I'm not saying our marriage was just so easy from the beginning, because it wasn't. And I think I'd be surprised if anyone got remarried and it was easy, because it brings up trauma from the past, right?
Right.
But I guess what I'm saying is we've learned how to manage all of that in a way that is healthy for us. And so it can sometimes feel like a little anxious, almost a little anxiety, not feeling anxious, if that makes sense, and
Right.
stressed out about interactions and whatnot. I would rather have it be quote unquote boring. That is starting to feel more comfortable to me, but it didn't before. So
Yeah, that healthy can often just feel unsettling. Maybe that's a better word too, is
maybe.
it can just feel unsettling to be around somebody that listens. I think some of us can probably get so used to just being ignored or dismissed, not overtly like being called names even, but just the joking around, like, oh, that's just silly talk, or, oh, let's just talk about that later, or just kind of that constant dismissive attitude towards us that when we're heard and listened to and, interacted with a lot, it feels either overbearing.
We feel like too opened up or something.
Yeah, it can feel like that, like
Vulnerable.
just being too seen. Sometimes being seen can be uncomfortable. Like,
Jennifer Finlayson Fife brings that up a lot. And being vulnerable and seen after having been seen in a first marriage where you give it your all can feel very disconcerting to most people. So
absolutely.
I think that is definitely that I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's something that most of us could relate with.
It's funny. There was a woman I dated in college, where when she broke up with me, I actually kept my head about myself pretty well, but she was telling me there are things you don't know about me, I'm not the right person for you. And she basically told me what Cathy just said, that she wanted a bad boy. And so years later, we're both divorced. And I was having a conversation with her about how things had worked out. And I said, you talked about wanting a temple marriage, and she was a returned missionary. You wanted to be active in the church and all that. So why marry a bad boy? And she said, well, I thought that he would change. And I
don't
said,
think
well,
it's ever a good idea to marry someone expecting them to change.
Right.
And I said, why not marry what you want instead of trying to change somebody? And she said, well, I have all these thoughts and feelings of what I want to do, things that are, wrong that I wanted to do. And I wanted to go out and have sex with people and stuff like that. And she said, it just told me that I'm not really a good person. And I said, wait a second. Temptation to do things that are wrong falls on everyone. Good boy, bad boy, you name it. It falls on all of us. We all want to do that stuff.
Human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you have those desires doesn't make you a bad person. And it was funny. She just sort of right before my eyes kind of got clear on this. I'm like, wow, I wish you would have told me that 30 years ago. And I said, well, I kind of tried to. But I guess sometimes we have to make the mistake for ourselves to get the point. But I do think you guys are right that a person can become comfortable with something that's really not good for them, and then reject what might be good for them.
And I
Right.
can't imagine if anyone listening decides to adopt courting themselves in the way that you're talking about, in the healthy way in which you acknowledge that and maintain that you are developing a second voice in your head that's more compassionate and flips the narrative from anything that you're negatively doing. I can't imagine that it wouldn't improve a lot of things for them in terms of what they're comfortable with.
Absolutely. And that's kind of baseline what it is I am definitely more comfortable with healthy and wholesome. But even just raising that bar and just really keeping it there and not allowing variances.
Yeah. And I do think we attract what, like, how you said, we only believe what we tell ourselves, like when other people bring it up. Well, I think the same is true. We only attract what, like, the behavior towards us that we behave towards us. Like it's almost like the law of attraction, really.
Right.
And the law of attraction really isn't about attracting people, but I think in this sense it does work, that when we put our focus on what we love about ourselves and what is good in us, we attract other people who see that, because that's where our focus is.
Light cleaveth unto light, virtue loveth virtue. That's
right.
section 88.
Yeah. Well, I love this courting yourself and nurturing yourself into in an even more connected to others person through that safety it creates. And I've created a list of at least 10 like benefits that you got from doing this practice over the last 6 months. And I'll be interested to see over time how that integrates, it just as, because it sounds like it already is.
Right, how it keeps growing and morphing and
Yes, yes, yes. And I love, and I think we're kind of kindred spirits because like, I think you think like I do in terms of if I'm going to be the very best therapist as you are, if I'm going to be the very best coach as I am, I need to do the work. I need
Yep,
to do that work myself so that I am showing
absolutely.
it up as the most healthiest person I can be.
Not that you've arrived, but that you're working.
Right.
And
No,
you're
we're all a work in progress.
developing.
We always are.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
and I kind of think of it always as like I don't mountain climb, but I do know a little bit about it, that it's easier to pull somebody up than it is to try and above you.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you are climbing up and working on it, you can keep helping the others go along with you. But, if you're here at the bottom of the mountain, you're not going to be able to really keep pushing others.
Right. Well, and as a violinist, I have to be a proficient player in order to teach my students what I know how to do.
Right.
So I think it's similar. And we learn so much along the way that, as we learn how to help others and we're helping ourselves, like we just grow so much.
Yep.
So
Always having knowledge that we wish we had a long time ago, but using it now.
yeah. And then having compassion for that person that didn't have that
Yeah.
knowledge. And like, I'm so glad I know it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure we could talk for hours with you. You're so interesting and you know so much. And
Thank you.
we really appreciate you coming and sharing your time and your thoughts with us. So to end, we usually ask like how people can find you. I know people know how to find us at Lily Coaching. We offer private and group coaching for women and men. And you tell us who you work with and how people can find you.
Probably just find me on my work website. It's at aliveaustin.com.
Okay.
And
Austin, like the city.
Austin, like the city. Yeah. And it's, you have to be careful too, because anybody that's not in Austin knows that there's also a animal shelter called Austin Alive.
Oh, okay.
So it's aliveaustin.com, and
Okay.
you'd be able to find me on there. And I can work with anybody in the state of Texas.
Okay.
I used to live in Texas too, and Austin is a really fun place to go spend a weekend.
So you could share this on all the Texas single sites, and that would be a
Yeah.
good way of inviting people into your space that could really resonate with you. And I know you also work with like cancer patients and family of cancer patients. I know that's a passion of yours.
Yeah, there's also a foundation I've been working with called Flatwater Foundation. And they help people around Austin and several counties around Travis County,
Mm-hmm.
finding counseling for people who either they themselves, partner, child, whoever's been touched by cancer, like whether it's their family member or themselves, or and in that little arena, they provide payment for counseling for these individuals. And
So
they even
for
do
anyone in
family.
Texas, right? Is that?
It's for anyone within a certain range. I don't remember how many. There's like 5 counties that they're
Okay.
working with.
Okay. But they're all eligible to be seen by you because you're in that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they give them a list of names and stuff that.
So if someone happens to be watching and they do have that factor in their family, is there a website that they can visit for that?
That I believe is flatwater.org.
Okay. We'll put it in the show notes. So yeah, we'll double check and make sure that's in the show notes so that because both. I know you do, and I know I do, and Jeff has. We've all experienced cancer in our own like realms, either in our own
And
families or really good
right.
close friends.
Now,
And
if,
everybody who works with them, all 100%, all the therapists are there because we all have been impacted by it somehow.
Yeah.
And
So you
so
have
they
passion.
only, yeah, so they only bring in therapists who have that personal experience.
Wonderful. I'm so
If-
glad they offer that.
and if somebody wanted to work with you that say lived out in Amarillo or Midland, do you work by Zoom also?
I do. I use a different platform, but yeah, I do virtual sessions too.
Okay.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, and that's what we primarily do as well. So we can work with people all over, which is really fun.
Yeah.
So remember, folks, try this out. Try courting yourself, developing that sort of inner partner that will be affirming and remind you of your value. And remember also,
Anytime is a great time for more love in your life.
thank you for watching.